Hi there, folks. My name is Leah. I'm a psychologist specializing in healthy relationships, and I'm the founder of LIFESEXPERTS. And today I've got with me Mark Emery, who is an amazing person that I've invited here to discuss some recent news. And I would ask Mark to introduce himself and say a few words.
Hello, Leah. It's great to be here. My name's Mark Emery. I'm an employment lawyer. I advise companies, I advise individuals on HR matters and on issues that we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Well, we had a chat last week and we realized that we read the same type of news around injustices at the workplace. Oh, what a coincidence. And we discussed the Goldman Sachs case that has been brought up to media attention about people working 18-hour long days and the situation in the company. And I thought it would be great if you as a lawyer, me as a psychologist, tackle this topic in the news from two very different points of view as experts in our respective fields. And I wondered, considering what they have done, what Goldman Sachs have done to deserve that kind of media attention and PR, one of the interesting things that I noticed is how they've used this loophole that they can ask people to opt out of the limit of working hours 48 per week so that they can kind of exploit them and not take care of them, and people end up working 18-hour work weeks. From your point of view as a lawyer, what do you think is that saying, and what would that sound like in court?
Well, it's been going on quite a while, and I think all these companies are aware it's been going on quite a while, and there have been media reports, for example, of young people at not just Goldman Sachs but other companies dying after working very, very long days and hours over the past few years. One who had an epileptic fit in a shower, another individual who committed suicide. Now, certainly, there's no suggestion that Goldman Sachs were involved, but their work was that the long hours they worked was certainly regarded as a factor in what happens. Now, there have been complaints in America from junior employees of Goldman Sachs. They have spread to the UK, complaining of long hours, 18-hour days, 20-hour days, quite horrific stories of people complaining anonymously in the main, when being told there's well-being videos when you're working from home. They're being told we don't even have time to go shopping, so we can't even eat because we haven't done any shopping. You've taken away our allowance for getting food brought in. Sometimes we're not even able to shower because we're working 20 hours at a time, sleeping 4 hours, getting up, doing another 20 hours. But the stories we're hearing are awful. Goldman Sachs have recognised this as a potential issue, and they recognise that they need to hire staff quickly. I think they've also recognised that they need to start being a bit more selective about the work they take on to ensure that there is that staff don't have to work these hours.
And how would that sound to? Oh, you vanished for a second. Okay. And how would that sound to you, let's say, as a judge? If that case was sitting in front of you, what kind of decision would you be inclined to make? Because it's obvious that this type of companies that, let's face it, they have an amazing reputation for being the top, etc. And usually they exploit that And usually they exploit this reputation for their advantage. People want to go there. It's so difficult to get in. They get the cream of the cream, and then they abuse people. So from my perspective as a psychologist, I can see emotional damage happening here, physical damage, just torturous working environment where, especially as a junior, you have no voice, because
it's not uncommon in, I don't think, an awful lot of jobs, and I'm not just talking about professions where there's high competitiveness. You know, there's we've just seen a case in the Supreme Court about nursing staff and sleeping overnight in care homes. Their entitlement to be paid when they're asleep, and only being paid when they're awake, the Supreme Court has decided is reasonable. Now, that is people working under high pressure and maybe only getting a few hours sleep a night, but actually not getting paid for that whole night. Pressure doesn't just affect those in the very high-paying jobs that we're talking about. And of course, there is an element of choice. Staff are going into these roles knowing that these are the kind of hours that they're likely to be working. And as I say, it's not just in this area. In law, junior employees in many areas are going to be working extremely long hours and sometimes overnights, in corporate law, for example. The issue is when it's incessant and all the time and there are no breaks. And and clearly at some companies, potentially Goldman Sachs, that line has been crossed, and it got crossed an awful long time ago, and nothing's been done about it. You asked the question, what would happen if this was in court? It's very difficult to say. If the kind of law I deal with is discrimination and dismissal-related law, if there are whistleblowing elements or health and safety complaints, for example, you would expect employees, these complaints, for example, to be treated very seriously and for things to be done about it, and for any staff who have raised these kind of complaints to be treated appropriately, their concerns taken seriously, and to ensure that both their well-being is looked after, that their health is looked after, and that should really involve a pretty significant reduction in the workload as soon as is feasibly possible.
See, as someone who has been employed in the past, I think my first thought would be, if I'm feeling exploited, I would like there to be someone in the company to be like, right, what's happening is probably not right. But I've seen it with my own eyes when when I worked in mental health, someone was on call 24/7 for weeks on end. I don't know what to call it, the company was understaffed, and they didn't really take care of him. HR and payroll would pay him for every hour of the week. Yes, that was on paper, it was visible that he's been working all of these hours. It was traceable that it's been for months, but still HR did zero to actually push management, seniors, CEO to protect the interest of the employee and the rest of the team, because everyone was stretched.
Employees are at the sharp ends of the dynamic of how profitable is this organisation, or if it's a public sector, is it operating within budget, ever squeezing budgets, versus how much can we squeeze out of our staff. And that is the nature of work nowadays, be it in the care home or be it in Goldman Sachs. It's the same dynamic, and it comes down to how much money are we as an organisation, able to spend on our employees, and how much work can we get out of them.
There's this assumption that, especially even for workaholics, I'm one, so I can speak as one, that we're extremely productive and we can work endless hours, and that's not true. There's this point of productivity that just goes down. As a psychologist, I would say if you are a CEO, an HR department manager, or somebody in charge of people, you should know that by pushing people to the edge, you're actually going to end up with a very exhausted workforce, and it will take you a longer time to get rid of them before but because that's the mentality that you exploit them and then you get rid of them when their performance goes down. But you build a reputation of being such an employer. And I wouldn't even put some of my previous employers on my CV because I'm even embarrassed for having worked for them.
Look at what the people at Goldman Sachs are saying. There's 3 to 6 people in the office on burnout, sick leave at any one time.
Yes.
At the same time, they've got how many vacancies for each individual role. There is the psychology of work in this country is incredibly interesting. You compare it to the very kind of rule-bound French system, where, for example, there is a rule that you cannot look in on your emails on a Saturday, I think. Overtime rules are you can only work a certain number of overtime days in a year, hours in a year, and you cannot exceed it. 200 or so, and you just cannot go beyond that, full stop. It's illegal. Either the Netherlands or Denmark, I can't remember which, have just are seriously considering introducing a 4-day week. I'm not sure about France, but there is certainly evidence that the reduced hours produce far more productivity. The Anglo-Saxon way of working attracts a lot of capital into the country because it's seen as the kind of more like the American system rather than the European system, and which is we work our employees hard.
Yeah, not necessarily to better results though, and I think that from a psychological point of view, social and psychological point of view, I've seen too many demoralized employees that I have had as colleagues, and I didn't want to work with them. And staying in the company for long enough, I've seen why they are demoralized, why they don't want to put high standard of work in. I'm fresh. I'm like, let's get things done. They're like, ugh. Why is she asking us
you
to
talk
do that?
You talk about psychology. I talk about culture. And in 20 odd years of being an employment lawyer and being fascinated about it all the way through, in part because the law is really interesting, but in main part because it's all about interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
And there are companies with good culture and companies with bad culture. There are companies that actually mean what they say when they talk about if you're stressed, talk to us. We will do something about it. We will give time off. We will work you hard, and we will want to make money out of you. But we're not going to push you. We want you to be here in 10 years' time and still enjoying it. There are companies like that, but there are companies also, I think, where the profit imperative becomes so high, sometimes because they're small companies whose owners are gearing up to sell, because again, that's a very kind of, the short term, build the company, profitable, make it profitable, sell it, is a very kind of British mentality towards corporate life, unlike companies often in Europe which will stay in the same hands for good or worse. There can be very good reasons why dynamic new people could come into a company and shake it up. But it can also lead to a very high churn of staff. It can lead to a demand for short-term results. which adds to pressure on employees, as opposed to the kind of incremental system that many companies across Europe will adopt. To be fair, I'm generalising, but that is often the kind of short-term profit motive is paramount in corporate life in Britain.
Is it worth it though, when it's all about the grind, and then we end up at a court situation? Is it worth it?
If I'm an owner of a company, a small company, and I'm a £5 million company, and I can build it up to a £25 million company and then sell it, and in doing so, I'm working my employees really, really, really hard, but I'm making £20 million out of this, and then selling it on to somebody. Okay, what they expect is totally up to them, but then the new owner says, I'm a £20 million company, I want to turn it to a £100 million company or a £200 million company. How do I do that? And, employees are going to get worked the whole way through. That's absolutely the nature of a large part of British business. And so if you want to change the psychology, that part, are you going to be able to when you're up against that ball of corporate life?
I think we can, if the government is interested a little bit more and they put pressure on companies. But
companies, we're going back to the Goldman Sachs issue, because I don't think government's going to do anything about it, but it's going to come down to reputation. If I was a business owner looking to instruct, or go to a bank or the like, and I saw that this bank is working their employees 20-hour days, I'd be wondering the kind of service I'm going to get from that company if everybody's too exhausted to do the job. It's reputational for the company. It is going to make sensible people think twice about going to work for them. The pandemic, I think, has been a kind of zeitgeist moment when it comes to kind of the way people look at work, and the way people interact in their communities, and the kind of hours people work, and the kind of commutes people have had to do, the way of working, where people do their work. This is a moment, if there is going to be change, this is a kind of great time for it.
I wish I could believe that. But what I would see is that because so many people have lost their jobs, because so many companies have gone belly up, there's such high unemployment that getting any job for some people is better than no job. And that would allow especially big companies to exploit. And that's what I'm fearing.
That's possibly the case. It's also the case that there's been there's been outward migration during the pandemic, in part because of Brexit, in part because people have been desperate to get back to their home countries for understandable reason. What kind of workforce is going to return? There's going to be a skills shortage in many industries. There is I hope a kind of young workforce out there who are going to demand better, and if you demand better, you may just get better. I'm not talking here, obviously, about the kind of jobs in the kind of Deliveroo issues. That's an entirely another subject. But I'm talking about people setting up properly on a career. And those unskilled work, it is going to be a desperate situation. I think you're right. But then again, there's going to be a building boom. You can but hope that there is going to be a little bit more power in employees to kind of demand slightly better terms. The way the court judgments are going in terms of people having rights who may have been classed previously as self-employed and have now got potentially worker status, which gives them employee rights when they work in that organisation, for example, to holiday pay and sick pay and maternity pay. those rights are creeping in, where businesses have tried to avoid them, the courts have come around and are blocking them, you know, that will potentially carry on. So there are good grounds for, you know, unless the government legislates otherwise, there are you know, grounds for optimism that there is a bit more power in the hands of the workers.
I do hope so, and I think that it would be nice to see a decline in that kind of treatment, as in Goldman Sachs and in law firms and in the health sector as well. I think that governments, I think that governments do have a role to play, but also people. I think that, especially with millennials are showing companies that they want to work for sustainable companies, for ethical companies, for companies that give them purpose. It's a new generation. Like, my generation is a new generation that the boomer generation really need to pay attention, because we want to work in a different way. We have very different values. We care about big world issues. And if we keep to that, maybe millennials have the power to change how the world runs by choosing right.
It's you know, veering completely off employment law into equally subjects of passion. You hope that the British government is going to take the lead of you know, the American government. We haven't been able to say that for 4 years, have we? On issues, you know, the Americans look as though they are starting to take, you know, environmental issues seriously. You know, the kind of the citizen environmental force they're talking about, you know, young people doing environmental works, you know, work which adds to kind of qualifications. For example, you know, I hope that's going to capture the imagination here as well, and that employees demanding better conditions of the companies they work for.
Well, that's a hope to have. I want to thank you for this brief overview of what's happening in Goldman Sachs, and to keep our, you know, fingers crossed that things will be working to change. But it starts with us. Everybody's responsible. Everybody has something to do, and I truly want to see companies paying a little bit more attention at the damage, the reputational damage, the court and legal case damage that it can cost them, and how they're shooting themselves in the leg by working people to the bone, because they end up not being productive and not being their ambassadors.
I like the analogy, working to the bone and shooting, and very good analogy.
Thank you.
Trying to get it out of my mind.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for this one, Mark, and I am looking forward to the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.